welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm McKelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 125 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 51 of A Clash of Kings, that's Jon 6.
And you know the drill, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully we'll provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide some additional information about the characters and other things of note in this chapter. How are you, McKelly?
I'm doing well. Do you like my shirt? You couldn't see it. I gotta...
Oh, this was news to me. I like it very much.
Stacey got me this for Christmas. It says, it's a shirt, and on the front it says... what does it say? Ask me about my podcast.
Yes. As if you needed any more people coming up to you and sort of bothering you.
True, that's true. I already, have to keep the bodyguards nearby to keep the throngs of fans off. How are you doing?
I'm okay. So the kid who lives with my mum.
Yes, the one with the boots in the dryer.
Boots in the dryer kid, yeah. A Premier League team is trying to buy him now.
Wow.
I know.
Wow,
the Premier League
something.
team, for a while we didn't know which team it was, and so I was free to speculate, and I actually got it right.
Oh.
It's Wolverhampton Wanderers are the first on the list, and Leeds United are also interested. I didn't get Leeds, but I thought Wolves might be interested.
Okay. Now, so your team is... in the fourth tier, is that right?
In the fourth tier, yes. So these are first tier teams want this kid.
Wow, so that's quite the jump.
He's going to become a lot richer.
Yeah, is your mom gonna up the rent?
I assume because these cities are far away, he will move out.
Oh shoot, there is that.
but he's sick in bed at the moment, which has got us all a bit worried because.
He lives with.
He might bounce back from COVID, but he lives with my mum, and she's 80-something,
Yes. Oh man. Well, that's exciting for him. I mean, I guess it doesn't change you or your mom's life any, but you. Oh,
it changes my life. If we're able to sell him for like big moolah, it's going to be
true. That's true.
It's going to be team. Good news for Oldham. Yeah.
That will improve your life, certainly. Good stuff. So I've got a story for you. So I sent my mom and my dad and my aunt some GOH merchandise for Christmas because
well done,
free advertising, but because I'm, as you know, a somewhat frugal person, I sent to get the free shipping. I had it all sent to my sister's house, and I thought she could disperse it. Because my mom and dad are divorced. They don't live together. So I thought I'll send it to one central location and she could play Santa Claus and disperse it. So she gave my mom and aunts their mugs on Christmas Day, but she didn't see my dad on Christmas Day, and then she forgot a few times to give it to him. So just this past weekend, she finally gave him his Christmas present from me, which was... our T-shirt. It's the the light blue one. It's very, very nice looking. It's actually our number one seller on the merch site. Is that light blue T-shirt. So he opens it, and he really likes the shirt. He thought it was very nice, but there was a surprise bonus present inside.
Get out!
Which no one knew was coming. So this is. I'm going to show you on my phone. My sister took a picture of it and sent it to me. This is the bonus prize that was
no.
What I'm showing Simon is a pair of pink women's underpants. That's what was in with the shirt. It's not even GOH underpants. It's just random underpants. Wait,
at what point was this in? Are they your sisters?
It was in the package. Like he opened the package.
In the package from Threadless.
Yes, I had a pair of women's pink underpants in there.
What kind of operation have we tied ourselves to?
Seriously. At first, I thought that was all that was in there. I was like, wait, the shirt didn't show up? She's like, no, the shirt was there too. But there was a pair of underpants in there.
I've got this horrible feeling your dad said, was like really pleased with the gift. So he dressed up in the t-shirt and the underwear and sent a photo of himself.
Please, no, don't do that.
That is really strange.
It's the strangest thing I have experienced in a while. Is that right there? So anyway, Merry Christmas, Dad.
Right. We can't top that. Let's get down to business. How did we leave Jon? Last we saw of Jon, he was welcoming Qhorin Halfhand into camp atop the Fist of the First Men. Qhorin told Jon and Lord Commander Mormont that Mance's wildling army was larger than the Night's Watch could imagine. Qhorin convinced Mormont to send 3 small groups of men into the Frostfangs to scout the happenings. Qhorin's first pick for his group was one Jon Snow. McKelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
Number 1 overall draft pick, Jon Snow. All right, so Jon and company spy a fire in the mountains of the Skirling Pass. Watchmen sent to guard against the Night's Watch, who due to the cold have succumbed to the temptation of fire, revealing themselves. The disciplined Night's Watch have had no fires as they marched for several days. They've slept close under blankets on the hard ground.
My back is actually hurting quite a bit at the moment, and actually in the notes it says my back hurts at the very thought of that, and it's very much true right now. My back does hurt at the thought of it.
It knew this was coming, so it started hurting for you.
Jon and his 4 travel companions have to disarm the Watchers of the horn that they surely have before they continue up the pass any further undetected. The only way to do that is to climb the mountain out of the Watchers' view, a daunting task in any situation, a near death sentence in the cold dark of night. Qhorin Halfhand asks for 2 men for the job. Stonesnake, the best climber of the group, volunteers, and Jon steps forward as the other.
Jon says a quick goodbye to Ghost, who's not well suited for the climb, before the 2 men set off up the narrow mountain trail. The climb is as hard and as dangerous as you might expect. Ice, fissures, wind, all make for a harrowing experience. The track they'd been following, hugging the mountainside, ended abruptly. Nowhere to go but straight up from here.
The climb is nearly deadly when Jon's foot slips, but ultimately Jon and Stonesnake reach their destination and find themselves hidden behind a shelf in the stone, looking down on the wildling Watchers only a few feet away from them. To Jon's surprise, there aren't 2 wildlings as expected, but 3.
One wildling is sleeping, one is sitting by the fire, and the third watches the pass. It's the third that has the alert horn. They each pick a man to kill and spring into action. Stonesnake takes out the Watcher before he can get the horn to his lips, while Jon runs Longclaw through the man by the fire. Jon jumps on the sleeping man as he stirs and puts a knife under the man's chin, and then he realizes the man isn't a man. It's a woman.
The woman seems to be about his age and reminds him of Arya, despite her bright red hair. After momentarily freezing, Jon asks if the woman yields, and she agrees. The girl's name is Ygritte. Jon gives his name and mentions he's the bastard son of Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell. Ygritte urges the men to burn the bodies of the other Watchers, or they might need those swords again. Instead, they dump the bodies over the cliff's edge.
Jon proves a terrible interrogator, getting only that there are hundreds and thousands of wildlings in the Frostfangs. All other questions go unanswered. Ygritte does tell him those men were as much kin to her as he is. Jon's confused. Ygritte asks him if he's familiar with Bael the Bard. Jon isn't, and she tells him a story involving Bael the Bard and the Starks. We'll discuss that story in some detail shortly.
So when dawn arrives, so do the other brothers of the Night's Watch and Ghost. Ygritte is stunned to see Jon interacting with a huge wolf. Jon explains Ygritte yielded to him so he couldn't kill her. Qhorin asks the girl if she knows him. She does. And what him yielding to her people would get him, a slower death. With that, he tells Jon to kill Ygritte and leaves them alone to make the task easier for Jon. When alone, Ygritte tells Jon Mance would take him if they ran together. He's not having that. Resigned to her fate, she moves her hair off her neck and kneels. But Jon's blow never falls. Instead, he tells her to go, quickly, before he changes his mind.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes. That reminded me of when Molly was playing t-ball, and there was two girls on her t-ball team, but the other girl didn't show up very often, so Molly was often the only the girl on the team. And one time I think we were walking out of the game, Molly and Stacy and I, and there was a boy and his mom walking just slightly ahead of us. And the boy kept going like this, "Mom, that goal's a goal." And she was like, and he's like, "But Mom, that goal is a goal." And the mom was starting to get slightly embarrassed. And she's like, "Yes, I know, honey. Girls can play t-ball too." And he's like, "But she's a goal."
For non-American listeners, t-ball is a derivative of baseball, right? Where instead of pitching, the ball is set up for them and they just whack it.
Yes, very much. It's for very little kids. It's like the very basic introduction to baseball and softball.
Interesting.
So, yeah. So, John discovered that this goal was a goal as well.
You know our Dutch listeners will be like, "What is he saying?
What is this ghoul stuff?"
Ghoul? She's a ghoul?
It's how they sometimes little kids pronounce girl. I'm saying girl. This girl is a girl.
We had grilled cheese sandwiches the other day, and ever since Lucas was little, those have been grilled cheese sandwiches in our house. So the whole chapter, the reason we're talking about T-ball at this point is because the whole chapter is something of a non-event.
Kinda, yeah.
There's some nice descriptions of the valleys and the mountains of the Skirling Pass as it approaches the Frostfangs, and it's not quite as. I mean, I had it sort of like just being snow and rocks, but there are some sort of like valleys where it's a little bit warmer and things actually thaw.
Right.
And there are animals and things, but
fields of flowers he mentioned
even,
at one point. So
and I will just mention in passing that Stonesnake, I think, was nearly 50 years of age and the best climber in the Night's Watch. And as a man of a similar vintage, can I say bravo, Stonesnake, because I can barely climb out of bed.
He does his nightly stretches, I guess. Keeps him limber.
Yeah, I guess so.
I'll mention that I think we can officially announce that Mormont's torch is gone, because we've had several night chapters and no mention of the comet. So I think...
Oh, that's a good point.
I think it's officially disappeared. It hasn't been mentioned in a while. And tonight, the moon is mentioned, the stars are mentioned, but no reference to the comet. So I think it's officially gone by. It's
quite... I hadn't thought about that. In fact, I saw Mormont's torch in the notes and I couldn't remember what it was. It's been so long since they've mentioned it.
You're not the only one. Apparently Martin forgot what it was too.
But the typical path of a comet is that it brightens in the sky and then fades again over time. So you'd think that at least that would get some reference, I guess.
Right, as it fades.
Yeah. I mean, you at least one character should have said, "That comet is not as bright tonight as it used to be."
Right, the fading red streak in the sky. Or at least mention that it, because it was such a big event at the beginning of the chapter. Everybody was talking about the comet. And then all of a sudden, nobody was mentioning the comet. Yeah. So you'd think there might be at least one reference to the recently moved through comet or something. But anyway.
Yeah. So they're climbing the Skirling Pass. It's the most southern of the three ways into the Frostfangs that the men of the Night's Watch are taking. It's to the east of the Fist of the First Men.
So the name of the Skirling Pass, it gets its name because of the sound that the wind makes when it blows through the area. I think John refers to it as a keening sound that the wind makes. So that's where it gets the name the Skirling Pass from. And so Jon's in a group of 5, and there's 15 men total that are in the 3 various parties that have gone up into the Frostfangs. Jarman Buckwell, he's taking men to climb the giant stairs. Qhorin Smallwood is taking men to probe the Milkwater, and Jon and Qhorin Halfhand and this group they got the assignment of the Skirling Pass. And now the other 2, the giant stairs and the Milkwater, are much closer together than the
Skirling Pass.
In fact, the Milkwater runs past where you'd climb the giant stairs. So they would have gone together for a while before the Jarman Buckwell and his group turned off to go up the giant stairs.
So the Halfhand's team consists of Jon, Stonesnake the Climber, Dalbridge, Eben, Qhorin Halfhand himself, and of course Ghost. They are all seasoned rangers. Well, I guess not Jon or Ghost,
right.
But they're also all from the Shadow Tower, so they're all sort of familiar with one another. Jon and Ghost are the outsiders here.
Exactly. Yeah, I thought that was. I thought that was a kind of interesting detail, that they all would be very familiar with each other. Jon would be kind of the outsider in multiple ways. He's both the only steward of the group, and he's from a different castle than them.
I will say in passing, and this doesn't hold up, but I would think that the Shadow Tower people would be more familiar with the area.
Yes.
I mean, this is over towards their main center of operations.
Right.
But at least one of the groups is completely Knights, Castle Black Rangers, I believe. So they didn't preferentially choose Shadow Tower Rangers.
Yeah, it would make sense, though. Maybe that's why Stonesnake knew this little path that they took so well, because maybe he's done it before, or has seen it before, at least. But one of the guys you mentioned, Dalbridge, they call him Squire Dalbridge, and they call him that because in his youth, he was a squire to a king, and they don't mention which king this was, but the king that he was actually a squire to is Jaehaerys II, who is the Mad King Aerys II's father. And the son of Aegon V, Egg from the Dunk and Egg series. So that is the king that he was squire to back in the day, and he must be he must be not necessarily a spring chicken, because Jaehaerys II died in 262 AC, and we're in 299, I believe, now. So
yeah, but you squire when you're quite young, so
yeah,
he could be around 50 as well, kind of thing.
That's true. Yeah. But he wonders what Mance fears to have these watchers in the pass, and I was thinking about that, and it seems like the activity from the Fist of the First Men, with all those people up there and all those fires, cook fires and stuff that they have burning, would have to catch someone's attention if they're paying, if they're looking out for anything. So they must have, they possibly at some level know that there's a ranging going on out here. They're not exactly hiding it. They're on the highest land that they could find with 200 people burning fires, so...
Right. And now they're creeping up on them.
Right, yes. But of course, we also have read the prologue to A Game of Thrones, so we know that there are scarier dangers north of the wall than just the North Watch.
Although, honestly, if the White Walkers came my way, I'm not sure I would blow the horn, to be honest. I'd be like, yep, they're coming.
I wonder if they use the same horn calls as the Night's Watch. They can really throw each other off with that maneuver. Jon actually asks Ygritte, when one of the few things he gets out of her when he's interrogating her, he asks, what were you sent to watch for the Night's Watch? And she said, you and others. And the others in the text is lowercase, but, possibly also referring to the others, the uppercase others.
Uppercase, yeah.
So
it may be to the wildlings, the others, it doesn't even warrant an uppercase. It's like those guys who hang around with those blue eyes, raise the dead.
Possibly they don't have a 700-foot wall to hide behind. So
right, they've had to make their peace.
Of course, it could
Granny
also...
died. Here she is. Do your business.
Do what you're gonna do. But it could be reference to a rival faction of wildlings that we're not familiar with yet. So
yeah, or maybe it was just like, look for whoever's coming.
Yeah, anybody, anything out of the usual.
Yeah.
Let us know about it.
So the wildling watchers give themselves away because they've lit a fire. It does feel like it's a break from discipline, but at the same time, they're not going to be as disciplined as the Night's Watch because they are just a ragtag band of people who live in the north. That's what wildlings are.
Right.
They're not an army.
Yeah, it's interesting that they succumb to the fire because, as Qhorin Halfhand mentions at the beginning of this chapter, fire means life and death north of the wall. And so instead of freezing to death, they lit this fire, possibly. But then when the wildling watcher was attacked by Stonesnake, instead of going for his sword first, he went for his horn first. So he basically threw his life in front of the sword in an attempt to try and warn not the others with capital L, but the other wildlings. This could get confusing.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
Yeah, but then again, I mean, as I think I mentioned, that guy is pretty heroic for going for... When someone's coming at you with a sword, to reach for your horn, not your sword, seems like a pretty heroic thing to do. But to be honest, you could see that as good discipline. It doesn't mean you're not going to be so cold you wouldn't light a fire.
Well, yeah, they are 2 separate things, I guess.
Yeah, you could say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to light this fire and take the risk, and if someone sneaks up on me, I'll blow the horn, and I'm, but I'm not freezing to death for nothing here.
Yeah, and of course, we know that whites seem pretty susceptible to fire, so maybe they lit this fire to protect against whites and other danger, whereas
that's a good point. Yeah.
The Night's Watchman might not take the other danger as serious, and because these wildlings, like you said, they live on the other side of the wall.
Right.
Others and whites could be a common foe that they deal with. Right.
They might want a fire lit because you don't want to have a White Walker coming towards you and be like with your flint. Come on, come on.
Just give me a minute.
Here, raise Granny.
So Ghost gets left behind, and Qhorin says the reason is because white fur is seen too easily by moonlight. But I gotta say, after reading about Jon's trek, which he mentions is a half a mile off and 2,000 feet up, and in some parts is a completely vertical climb, I had to think that the white fur is the least of the limitations of why it would not be suitable to bring Ghost on this trip.
But honestly, Ghost would find a way up there.
Probably.
If I were them, I would send Ghost ahead with a rope tied to him and then sort of hold on to that. One detail that we skipped over was that they do this vertical climb barehanded because the glove technology is not what it is today, and so they're afraid to wear gloves because the gloves could slip and they could fall. So they do this barehanded, which must be so cold. I mean, this is mountaineering in the Arctic at night.
Yes, right. Yeah, that's rough right there. Yeah. But the whole climb, I several times I couldn't help but think of Kat's climb up to the Eyrie with Maya Stone, and it just once again, Jon and Kat have some common threads to their story. They both injured their hands while protecting someone else. They both love the same people, just not each other. They love the members of the Stark family, and both spent time with Tyrion, although very different experiences. Jon was his friend. Kat took him as a captive.
But you know what? I think Kat began to sort of at least admire him a little bit.
A little bit, yes. I think so. I think her opinion of him started to change a little bit during the trek. And he did save her life, so.
Yeah.
But now they've both had death-defying treks up a mountain with a guide who seemed totally unaffected by the climb. So,
Yeah. Good spot.
So when they finally get up, by they I mean Stonesnake and Jon, they finally get up onto the cliff that they were trying to get to, and they're looking down from this little shelf, and they're really only a few feet above the wildlings, who are unaware that they're there, and they each pick a person to kill. Stonesnake nods toward the man with the horn, and Jon nods toward the man by the fire, and Jon thinks to himself that the act seems odd to be picking out a person that you're about to kill. And
right.
He thinks to himself he's spent his whole life training for moments like this, but to actually do it, this is, to our knowledge, the first living person that Jon has killed, because he finished off Other, but Other was a white. He was already dead.
Yes, he was already dead, yes.
All this training that, all the times practicing in the yard comes down to this moment, and he thinks it feels odd just sitting there and picking, I'll kill that one, you kill that one. And you have to imagine it's very different from the training that he would have received by Ned and Sir Roderick Cassell. Hiding and picking a man to kill it's not the most honorable way to do battle.
Right, and his starkness would want him to be more honourable, to cough loudly, to give them a chance to draw their swords.
Yes, you'd have to imagine at Winterfell, they're trained to meet the opponent on the field, face to face, mano a mano. Here's your sword, here's my sword, not sneaking up on someone. Although, he wonders if Robb felt like this before his first battle, and Robb's battle was a sneak attack ambush as well. So
right. But it was a sneak attack ambush against hundreds of armed and mounted soldiers.
Right, yes.
So this is a little bit more sneaky.
People.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it must have been quite tense. I mean, obviously, dropping on someone in the middle. Tense for all involved, not just for Jon and Stonesnake.
Right, yes.
Tense for the wildlings too, I would imagine. But, they were outnumbered. If Ygritte had got up quicker, or if either of the two quick dispatches had taken any time, this could have been dangerous for them all, but they got through it.
And they don't know the fighting ability of these wildling men. I mean,
True.
They do have the element of surprise, so they have that going for them. But, if one or both of these guys was a magician with a sword, they could have been in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and as we said, the wildling did reach for his horn rather than his sword, which, that's more than Theon's Ironborn managed to do. You remember
Squint.
When Squint was the one who was killed when Osha and the kids escaped, and that was... He presumably had a chance to alert people to the fact that the dire wolves were out of the Godswood, but he never got to do it because he is not as disciplined as the wildlings. But then again, he also probably didn't think that was... The thing is, the wildlings were there really for one reason, which was to alert the other wildlings if someone came.
Right, yeah.
Whereas Squint he had a bunch of things. It was like, don't let anyone go out of the castle, make sure that if an army hoves into view, you let us know. Two wild direwolves creeping up on him probably was...
Wait.
What do I do for that? How many blasts of the horn is that?
How many blasts of the horn is wild direwolves? He was consulting his little cheat sheet.
Ancient communication systems of Westeros. So it's clear that Ygritte is very afraid of the dead rising and pretty much nothing else. I mean, she's tough as nails.
Right.
She herself doesn't want to become a white. She asks that the bodies of her two companions be burned there and then, but they push them off the cliff instead. But then they hear mountain lions, eating the dead bodies. So she says that'll do it. That's good enough. But she says when she's killed, she wants the same to happen to her. She doesn't want to be laid there to rest,
right?
In state. She wants to be pushed off the cliff to the mountain lions.
Yeah.
She's tougher than me.
she says to them, I'd burn those bodies, and they're like, well, we can't. We need too big of a fire for that. And Stonesnake thinks it might be a trick that she's trying to pull, make a really big fire, some sort of signal. And so she says, you better do it, or you're might have to use those swords again. But the Shadowcats arrive pretty quickly, like within minutes of them dumping those bodies. And Ygritte seemed to expect that. She said that they being the Shadowcats, can smell blood like 6 miles away or something. So I was wondering if maybe the practice of burning the bodies is more superstition than practical, because if they had left those bodies there, the Shadowcats were going to get them before any... I also,
so you really think she was playing a trick, basically?
Maybe. Or because I assumed that others had to physically turn corpses into whites, like touch them or do something physical to them, not just they just randomly do it, like any dead body just randomly reanimates. I don't know, I guess.
Yes, we don't know that, do we? I mean, it could just be that if you get within a quarter of a mile, the dead rise.
Yes, it could be. So,
but you got to think that the Shadowcats, mountain lions, they probably are attuned to listen for things falling down the cliffs, because occasionally animals probably fall off the edge and plunge to their deaths, and that's an easy meal for the Shadowcats. Yeah. So,
yeah, that's true. So, I mean, speaking of the poor men that they just dumped over this cliff that were eaten by the Shadowcats, who knows who they were to her? They could have been family, friends, a spouse, or maybe just other scouts who are assigned to watcher duty tonight or this week or whatever. She says to Jon that they're no more family than Jon is to her, but chances are she knew them pretty well. I mean,
she was spending the evening with them,
Right, yes. Chances are they chatted.
Names.
Right. So, it had to have been hard for her to watch them be dumped so unceremoniously over the edge.
But then again, if she's genuinely afraid of them coming back to life, then
yes,
that's easier to watch that than to watch them come at you again.
Very true. Yes, that's true. Once they're already dead.
Yeah, Jon, going to page 4 of the How to Interview a Captive, reveals who he is. Gets nothing out of her, but spills the beans to her.
Stonesnake has a funny line. Jon starts telling her that he's Jon Snow, the bastard of Winterfell. His father is Eddard Stark. My first thought was, good Lord, he'd never survive an Arya storyline. He'd blab to everyone he meets, I'm Jon Snow, bastard son of Eddard Stark. But Stonesnake says, aren't the captives the one that are supposed to be telling you things?
Yes, but he doesn't get anything useful. He doesn't know. She won't tell, or she doesn't know what Mance wants, whether they plan to march on the wall, or the whereabouts of Benjen Stark.
Although she does have an interesting response. So Jon says his name is Jon Snow, and before he even says the rest of the stuff, the description is Ygritte flinches and says that's an evil name, which feels like a noteworthy response to such a benign thing to say. And I wondered what that could mean. Why is the name Jon Snow evil? But south of the wall, there's a negative connotation with having a bastard name like Snow, but I can't imagine why that would have any impact on a wildling north of the wall.
Just a thought here. Is it perhaps because she does know what it means? She knows what it signifies. They know north of the wall what the surname Snow signifies. And it's that there's no concept of being a bastard north of the wall. And they see it as like that poor kid was marked from birth as being, an outsider and, tainted.
I see what you're saying.
Whereas north of the wall, it wouldn't make any difference. You wouldn't get labelled as Snow just because your parents weren't married.
Yes, that could be. Yeah, because there's no there's no other information given. He doesn't say, why do you think that's evil? Why is my name evil to you? So that's a solid guess.
Yeah. So Ygritte claims, distant kinship through this story of Bael the Bard. When she started this story, I was like, why is this wildling, who's not telling him anything else, now telling him fairy stories, to try and sort of like make a family connection between the two of them? Hey, we're cousins, it's like...
Right.
I assumed initially she was just trying to ingratiate herself, and so I thought she was just making it up. But she had a lot of details in the story that lent it, sort of like a feeling of like reality, or at least it was a known story. She wasn't just winging it. One aspect that it made me think about was the fact that the Starks are supposed to have an unbroken line that goes back 8,000 years, which is extraordinary.
It is.
I was trying to look in our world if any families had that kind of longevity. And the only one that I could come across was the descendants of Confucius. Confucius, the Chinese philosopher.
Right.
His descendants trace their... they exist today, and they can trace their family tree all the way back to him. And that's 2,500 years. Which, by itself,
half.
It's extraordinary that they've managed to do that.
Absolutely.
But this is 8,000, and it never got broken. I mean, it never got broken. It almost got broken at the Bael the Bard thing.
Right.
I mean, this was like, it was on a knife edge here.
Yeah, you'd have to think if you're going to have a line that lasts that long, people need to have a lot of kids. You need to have, because you're going to have backups and, redundancy heirs and lords. And so him only having this one daughter, the Brandon, the daughterless, the Brandon Lord from this story, that was very risky, him only having one daughter,
Yeah.
There's no backup
there. If nothing else, that actually should signify the end of the Stark line.
Because
she wouldn't be a Stark when she gets married, But kind of luckily, Bael the Bard came along and kept the line alive by having a child with her out of wedlock that could then be a Stark.
Yeah, you'd think maybe there's a distant cousin. I mean, it's Westeros,
I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and any DNA sample of an 8,000-year-old Stark and a current Stark, they're not that related. There's been things happen along the way.
Yeah, you're
Stark-ish. By the way, just to mention actually, the Confucius line, his 79 greats grandchild.
Wow.
Was born in 2006. So I mean, their last name is Kong. That's that, and there's been a Kong for 80 generations back, all the way to Confucius.
Kong, Kong, like King Kong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That I saw this in the notes, and I was fascinated reading it, and I'm fascinated hearing you tell it.
The story she tells is of Bael the Bard. He was public enemy number one in the north. He was the Mance Raider of his day.
Right.
He slipped into Winterfell as a musician. He named himself Bard Sigurd, which meant deceiver in the language of the First Men. I'm a little bit surprised that nobody in Winterfell picked up on that, because they feel like they're northern.
Agree. Yes, yeah. They're so proud of that First Men blood.
Exactly.
And, you'd think they'd have retained some of the language, but
there weren't many Starks around in those days, of course, because they were really running close to the end of the line.
They were.
In return for his music, which is well received, he asks for the most beautiful flower in Winterfell, which he gets, literally, a blue winter rose, but overnight he replaces it, figuratively, with Lord Brandon Stark's daughter. She goes missing for a year, and she's believed lost, and this really is the end of the Stark line, because he doesn't have any other children. But a year later, she returns with a son, and this is Bael's son. And the child... Do we know the child's name?
No, I don't think we do. No.
Yeah, so the child grows up to be the Lord of Winterfell, and actually meets his father, Bael, in battle. And Bael will not fight him, and so the child kills the father in battle. Possibly unwittingly, although if I were Bael, I would be like, I'm not fighting you because I'm your father.
I am your father.
I'm your father. But he was not listening, and he killed him. So the start line definitely got diluted with some wildling blood there. And there is a legend that Bael and the daughter never left Winterfell. They hid in the crypts. Now, Rickon would have smoked them out day 2.
Right, he certainly would have.
But without any kids around, you could hide in the Winterfell crypts for a year.
Yeah, that's theoretically you could. I'm not sure the logistics of that work out very well, and then so that the end of the story. That's the end of the song. But the end of the story is that when the Bael's son comes back to Winterfell with Bael's head, and his mother sees Bael's head, she is so distressed she throws herself from a tower. So it has a bit of a bummer of an ending. Well, of course, the ending was a bummer for Bael, regardless. But
yeah. Everyone in that story is dead. It's pretty much a bummer for everyone.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
but that's interesting because although she was perhaps kidnapped, she actually fell in love with Bael enough to kill herself when she found him, when she discovered he was dead.
Yeah. Of course, Ygritte says that all of Bael's stories had women falling in love with him. So, But it's
the advantage of being a musician.
Yeah. It's more blue roses and stark imagery together here. And much of that revolves around Lyanna with the blue winter roses. Way back in Ned 4 of A Game of Thrones, when he's in the crypts with King Robert, Ned remembers that the room he found Lyanna in, smelling like blood and roses, and that rose petals fell from her hand as she died. And then in Ned 10 of A Game of Thrones, when he's dreaming about the Tower of Joy and fighting the Kingsguard, the dream ended with a storm of blue roses, and we know that Rhaegar gave Lyanna a ring of blue roses when he named her the Queen of Love and Beauty at the tournament at Harrenhal. And then the outlier is that Dany also saw a blue flower in the House of the Undying when she was having all those visions. It was a single blue flower growing from a chink in a wall of ice. So, here we've got a rose representing the missing Stark daughter, because when they go to her room, all that's in the bed is that blue flower that he asked for, the blue winter rose. And the Stark daughter is missing. And we get a lot of instances throughout this story of a rose representing a missing Stark woman, because Lyanna is missing, and Ned often thinks of her associated with blue winter roses. So
yeah, but there are parallels here between this Stark daughter and Lyanna as well. That both of them were taken by singers.
Right.
Rhaegar was known as a singer.
Yeah, right. A musician.
Now, the daughter is clearly fell in love with Bael on some levels, enough to kill herself when she discovered he was dead. So that seems like that's more in love than I am, to be honest. But Lyanna, I mean, there's no evidence that Lyanna was, in love with Rhaegar, but she died in his care. The Stark daughter was returned with child, but she was returned safely. So there are parallels, but also differences.
Yes, exactly.
How long ago was it, McKelly?
Well, that is hard to know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, go on. You have a lot of good information here about the Stark generation.
Yeah, well, so it was a Brandon Stark. The father who only had the daughter was a Brandon Stark, right?
Yes.
So there've been, but extrapolating Confucius to the Starks, there've been 270 generations of Stark. I'm going to guess at least 100 of those got named Brandon, because that just seems to be the most common name. So that doesn't exactly narrow it down. Ygritte, perhaps misinformed, definitely ignorant, calls them lords, not kings. Now, if they're lords, not kings, that would put it in the last 300 years.
And she mentions the King's Road.
Which also makes it fairly contemporary.
Would have been also, after Aegon the Conqueror. So
after Aegon the Conqueror.
Yeah.
But Jon had never heard of old Bael, and therefore presumably old Nan had never heard of Bael either. And pretty much old Nan's been there 300 years, so she would have bounced Bael on his knee. If Oh, I remember Aegon the Conqueror.
Yeah, I found it interesting that old Nan had never told Jon this story either. So
right, so possibly it's just a myth north of the Wall.
Right.
Possibly, Ygritte has the story mangled a little bit because it could be a 4,000, could be a 7,000-year-old legend.
Yeah. Yeah, and things got twisted and changed as the generations went on. In the current generations, there's been a King's Road for the past few hundred years, so he skipped down the King's Road.
Right.
So.
But actually, there is one other thing to make it seem like it was older, because there is a reference to the Boltons. Well, it's a reference to a Stark house doing flayings. We're going to assume that's the Boltons because that's their motif.
Yes.
But they are supposed to have given up that hobby more than 1,000 years ago. So there you are. It's not. It's in the last 300 years and also not in the last 300 years.
Someone needs to tell that to Reek, though.
Right.
They gave that up 1,000 years ago.
Clearly there's a fondness for it in certain members of the household.
Brandon is the name most associated with the Stark house. So maybe Brandon was just a placeholder for the Lord at Winterfell at the time, right. So
yeah.
But as we'll see in background today, the historical details are very sketchy, and so some of the family tree limbs have some blank spots and issues and stuff. So we don't have a complete picture of all the Brandons and how many children and what the children were. So we might never know the answer to who Brandon the Daughterless was.
Right. It is interesting that the story comes up in a Jon chapter, because basically it is the story of a Stark bastard becoming the Lord of Winterfell.
Yes, yeah.
And
right.
We talked about this before, that Jon isn't completely out of the running for that. I mean, there's many reasons he's out of the running for it. He's sworn brother of the Night's Watch, he's a bastard. But you never know.
Right.
There's a lot of books still to read.
Yeah, maybe she was scrolling through her mental Rolodex of stories to keep him distracted, and when he said he's the bastard of Winterfell, she was like, Bael the Bard. I've got it. One. I got the perfect story for you.
Also, it's interesting to me that it follows hot on the heels of another escape from Winterfell as well. The last chapter was Bran and Rickon escaping Winterfell.
Yeah.
And we've just heard Bael and the daughter escaping Winterfell. Although in their case, they didn't escape Winterfell. They stayed put.
Yeah.
Apparently.
And it's similar that in both instances, the Starks disappeared from bed in the night. So,
and the direwolves were singing like Bael.
That's right.
And then they went quiet.
When the singing went quiet.
Exactly. That's when you got to worry about those singers.
That's right. Yeah, like I said, the logistics of hiding in the crypt for a year doesn't make a great deal of sense. They would have had to have help from a third party because there's no food down there. And I mean, she's pregnant. She must have been in love with him. I'll say that. If she's
How much marrow can you get from an old dead Stark bone, really?
Right, yes. She was clearly in love with him to hide in a dank, dark crypt alone and pregnant for the duration of the pregnancy. So, if all this was true, she was definitely in love with him.
True. So Qhorin arrives and gives a thumbs down to keeping Ygritte around, and it makes sense. She knows him. She says if he yielded, that would just get him a slower death. He says it's too dangerous to let her live, and he's not wrong about this.
Yeah.
McKelly's a gentle soul, and he doesn't want it to be this way, but
it just doesn't have to be. The Night's Watch as the military organization and the power with the clear upper hand, having the 700-foot continent-spanning wide wall on their side, they don't have to pick fights with the wildlings. They could let them live in peace on their side of the wall and only we've argued why prevent them from coming across the wall. It's not what the wall was intended for.
Right.
So what's the harm in just letting them be? Why does both sides have to kill the other side all the time?
I think strategically you're right. No question. Strategically you're right. There's no reason for them to be out here killing wildlings. Tactically, I think Qhorin's right.
Yes. In this situation, I was mostly referring to her saying, we'd kill you if you yielded. You're going to kill us if I yield, I guess ultimately maybe it would hurt Night's Watch morale, because if they weren't fighting the wildlings, then for the past several thousand years, they would literally have nothing to guard against besides snarks and grumpkins, because
Good point.
Others haven't been seen in quite a long time.
except at Castle Black a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
No, wait, sorry. I'm doing the classic mixing up the whites and the others.
All right.
The effect of the others was seen at Castle Black.
Yes.
So Jon lets her go. It's an awful decision strategically, but it's morally the right thing. Jon is a good guy. Will Ygritte be as kind to him? I'm going to say no.
I would agree. Yeah.
She's not a sucker for a girl with red hair. Jon is.
Yeah, I like your line here about how she what she says when she gets back to the camp.
Yeah, it would be difficult for her to go back to Mance Rayder, and he says, "Where's those other two?" And she's like, "Oh, they fell off the cliff. Silly." Yeah. I mean, like, it was really icy. They should have been more careful. They were tied together for safety.
I suggested lighting a fire so we could see where we were going, but they insisted.
See people? No, I don't know what you're talking about. We didn't see anyone.
Yeah, I knew. I knew because I've already read this, but the minute he thought she reminded him of Arya, the chances of him then decapitating her were pretty low. Now, maybe if she had reminded him of Kat, that might have been different. But
you know what? The thing is, she could let it go. She could let it slide, because she gets back to camp. No one's going to notice her one way or the other. If there's as many as she thinks there are, hundreds and thousands.
Right.
But it's not like, she knows how many there were. There were 5 of them. 5 of them and a direwolf. It's hardly an existential threat to an army of thousands.
Yeah, that's true.
Unless she knows that they're up to something that can't be spied on. There's been talk of them doing something magical there, and maybe even knowledge of that would be enough to help the Night's Watch, perhaps.
Yeah, that's all good points. Yeah, Qhorin says to Jon, do what needs to be done. You're the blood of Winterfell, a man of the Night's Watch. And I think that statement hits at the heart of Jon's confliction of what to do about Ygritte, because on one hand, he's Ned's son, raised by Ned, trained by the honorable Sir Roderick Cassel, which that same honor is what Theon played on to get Roderick to ride out of Winterfell in the first place. So, his honor, the woman yielded to him. It seems unlikely that he's going to kill her. But then, on the other hand, he's also a brother of the Night's Watch, and they are feuding with the wildlings, and such executions seem rather commonplace on both sides. As Ygritte just said, you'd still die whether you yielded to us or not. And we've heard of Qhorin, last Jon chapter, was torturing a wildling to get information out of him. So
yeah.
But Qhorin leaves Jon alone to do the deed, and it reminded me of that scene in Austin Powers, the first one, when Dr. Evil just leaves Austin and Vanessa on that platform that's slowly sinking into the pool with the sharks, and his son, Seth, played by Seth Green, is like, "What? You're just gonna assume that?" And he's like, "Yeah. What could go wrong? Of course, I'm just gonna assume that it happened." And he's like, "I've got a gun in my room. I'll go get it. We'll shoot him right now. We'll do it together." And he's like, "Don't be ridiculous. I'm just gonna shut the door and assume that they die."
Yes. Yeah, and especially because it wasn't that hard to spot the fact that Jon was going to be conflicted about this,
Right.
It's as if Qhorin was inviting it, to be honest.
Maybe. That's possible. It's possible that he was expecting it and was okay with it and just not wanting the other guys to see that he's okay with it. That's a possibility.
Yeah. And Ygritte recognises it too. She tries to say we could run away together to Mance Rayder and he would welcome us,
Yeah. Both sides try to play on each side of the of Jon's confliction here. And it reminded me of Theon's words last chapter. I think Theon was the last chapter, right? The last Theon chapter.
Oh, yes, it was anyway. Theon. Yes, yeah. I think I said it was a Bran chapter, but it was a Theon chapter, of course.
When he was thinking about mercy, and he was thinking that it's a double-edged sword. Too little mercy and you're considered cruel. Too much mercy and you're considered weak. And to strike that right balance. And here's Jon trying to figure out how to strike the right balance of mercy here for Ygritte.
So you said you had some background about this whole Bael business.
I do. So Ygritte says that the Lord of Winterfell, who Bael the Bard played his trick on, was a Brandon Stark, and that Bael skipped down the King's Road on his way to Winterfell. So if we take all the details of this story as fact, which, in fables, that's not always a good idea, but if we were to, then that dates Bael a bit, because construction on the King's Road was started in 62 AC by King Jaehaerys I Targaryen. So if we just go back the past 300 years, since, again, Ygritte called him Lord Brandon, not King Brandon, there have been 8 Brandons in the Stark family, at least that I'm aware of. Like I said, the family tree gets a little paired at times. And, of course, it ending with our current Bran, our POV Bran here. The first is technically a Snow, as Brandon Snow was the bastard brother of Qhorin Stark, the king who knelt. This Brandon was most famous for offering to sneak into the Targaryen camp at night and kill the Targaryens' 3 dragons, which probably would not have gone very well for him.
And that was the last we heard of him.
But he was never Lord of Winterfell, so and he wasn't a Stark either, technically, so that rules him out. The first Lord Brandon Stark to rule Winterfell after Aegon's conquering was a man named Brandon the Boastful. However, he died in 49 AC, 13 years before the construction on the King's Road had even started. So, and he also had 2 sons, Walton and Alaric, and both of them became Lords of Winterfell. So he doesn't fit the bill very well either. And the only other Lord of Winterfell who was named Brandon since the Starks became lords instead of kings is Cragen Stark's son. The timeline is a bit sketchy on him. He died somewhere between 184 and 212 AC. And he had 3 sons, one being a bastard, and a daughter. So, and Jon mentions Brandon Shipwright and his son Brandon the Burner, and both were kings of the North and lived before Aegon's conquering, so well before the King's Road was built. But they don't necessarily fit either, because Brandon Shipwright, one, died when he just disappeared. He tried to sail across the Sunset Sea and was never seen again, and he had a son, Brandon, who burned the rest of the fleet in sorrow over his father's death. So
you'd think that would come up, like it wasn't really his son, it was Bael's son.
Right. So there you go.
The one who was most likely there was Cregan's son, but he really might be getting into Old Nan's timeline, because
212.
If he died in 212 and had a daughter, she probably would have known that daughter. I mean,
possibly, yeah. I mean, we're talking not 80 some years ago.
80 years ago, yeah.
At that point,
yeah. When the father died, the daughter obviously
yes,
still be alive. So
yeah.
So, comparison with the television show, the actors who played Jon Snow and Ygritte, Kit Harington and Rose Leslie, respectively, got married after meeting on the set of Game of Thrones.
Yes, it's very cool. I don't know that the description of Ygritte in this chapter matches very well with Rose Leslie. He kind of portrays her as a round face and a pug nose and bandy legs, and short and stout. And I mean, that's just not how I would describe Rose Leslie, I guess I'd say.
In reading up a little bit about her, I discovered how deeply posh she is.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, Ygritte sounds like me. She's like, Jon Snow, and she has this very sort of northern, sort of like rough voice. But the real Rose Leslie is extremely posh.
Well, la-dee-da.
So much so that if I ever met her, I would take off my cloth cap and ring it cringingly in front of her. Like that's the archetypal British thing to do in the presence of your betters.
Okay, ring your hat.
Ring your cap, yeah.
Okay.
So
I liked your visuals. Unfortunately, our listeners can't see the visuals of you ringing a cap.
The whole scene gets simplified just down to Jon, Qhorin, and co. coming across a band of around 5 wildlings. They kill the other 4 and capture Ygritte. Qhorin asks Ygritte if he would be shown mercy by the wildlings. She admits that he would not. He offers to do it himself. Qhorin offers to do it himself, but Jon, son of Ned, says he'll do it. He cannot, and she gets away from him. Big chase ensues, like really a big chase. Like I think this was an opportunity to film some of the countryside in Iceland where they were filmed like this. And the
like
chase
a Keystone
leads them...
Cops type situation.
yeah. Well, no, just Jon and Ygritte. The others left him to it, you see, and she runs in the opposite direction. So now he's legging it.
He's like, oh, I'm in big trouble now.
He recaptures her, but she's emboldened now, and she says, "You can't do it. We both know it." Because he had his chance and he didn't do it.
Right.
The chase has led them away from the others, and they're forced to bed down from the others' lowercase.
Right.
Not north of the wall lowercase, south of the wall lowercase, yeah.
Uh-huh.
They're forced to bed down for the night. Ygritte wants a fire. Jon is not that green. They snuggle together for warmth. Ygritte tests her bonds and Jon's vows, if you know what I mean.
I think I'm picking up what you're putting down.
She constantly questions his vows in great depth to Jon's mortification. And interestingly, it's Jon who says that they share this blood. The two of them share blood. That's given to him, not her. Because he's saying that Starks, trace their lineage to the first men, so people north of the wall do too. So it's him that says that. Ygritte asks, as McKelly and I have on several occasions, why are you fighting us if we've got the same blood? So
right, yes.
Pedantry corner. It's small. It's really small. It's this positively pedantic to even mention it, but.
That's our favourite ones.
He mentions that Eben, one of the 5 in this group, is muscled like a bag of rocks. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think a bag of rocks has any muscles.
It's kind of potato sack-like, I guess.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's tough. I mean, like you could say, his muscles were like rocks.
Hard like a bag.
Hard like a rock. Yes, but a bag of rocks doesn't feel like a very muscly thing. Just say.
Yeah. A description jumped out to me as being unusual in this chapter as well. So right when they're getting ready to pounce on the 2 wildlings that they're about to kill, Jon said the description in Jon's head says that Stonesnake moved as fast as his namesake. And I thought, is there a snake called a stone snake? I Googled it. I could not find such a snake. So
it's actually a statue of a snake.
Exactly. I don't picture a stone snake moving very quickly. So I was like, what a weird description. Maybe there's a snake called a stone snake that I missed, but otherwise,
legendarily fast.
He just tumbled off of the shelf.
So news and notes. I think we'd both like to thank Lucas for doing a great job of the editing of the last 2 episodes. Lucas don't edit this bit out. One of the problems that Lucas had was because of our relentless professionalism, he couldn't tell which bits needed to get edited out and which bits we were actually meant for to be in there. So we've taken in this episode to saying, Lucas, edit this bit out when we mess up. Lucas, we're just talking about you now. Keep this bit in, okay?
Right, yes. You're doing a great job with the audio editing. I've been very impressed with your skill. So thank you very much, Lucas. And also, I added a bunch of new items to the Threadless merchandise site this past week. I've added sweatshirts and stickers and magnets. And can't remember if I've added anything else or not. But go check it out. There's a bunch of cool new things on there.
Thanks for doing that. Great progress on our push to get Spotify ratings. Thank you all so much for doing that. We've got a bunch. We're way more than I anticipated at this point. So keep it going, please.
As of the beginning of, I checked right before we started recording, we were second overall in a Song of Ice and Fire podcasts on Spotify. And of the top front runners, we are the only one with a 5.0.
Oh, 5.0.
The one ahead of us, not a 5.0. So
more people listening, more people disappointed.
Exactly. So that's all thanks to you. We appreciate it so very much. I promise we won't keep my my voice up there at the beginning of the show asking you to please go review us up there forever. So anyway, thank you very much for that. It's fantastic.
All right, let's conclude. So Jon's making progress towards his ultimate goal of meeting Mance Rayder, I guess. They should be able now to get to Mance Rayder undetected, or at least sneak in there at some levels undetected.
Theoretically.
But the problem is now Ygritte is in the wild and she might be back there before them announcing, hey, there's 5 Night's Watch coming through that pass right there.
Right. Send 20 guys
yes.
of the thousands that you have.
and arm them with swords, not horns.
Right. Yeah, his decision to let her go feels important on... There's multiple levels here. I mean, like you said, it puts the entire mission and his life and his companion's life in jeopardy. But he's also defied a direct order from a superior. And, that's not the first time he's done that. But the other instances, he's been brought back into line by someone, like we've said, usually a wiser, older person calms him down and brings him back in line before any real damage can be done. But here, there's no stopping her now. I don't think they can catch up to her, and the execution order was one that his companions made with very little thought or concern. So on some level, that creates a gulf between him and them. They thought nothing of just cut her head off, just kill her.
Yeah.
So,
just coming back to the TV show, actually. In the TV show, he gets a bit of a pass in the TV show because he basically swings the sword and misses her on purpose. And at that point, she escapes. He doesn't let her go. She escapes and he chases her. So there's a slight difference there.
Yeah, there is.
He didn't intentionally say, you can go. He's beginning to see the wildlings as people more than he has before. And that's, because he's made a connection with Ygritte. And honestly, more of the Night's Watch should do that.
You'd think the Rangers might have had similar interactions to this.
The only person they seem to sort of interact with on a friendly basis is Craster, who's a monster.
Yeah, that's true.
The nice wildlings they kill randomly.
Yeah, you got to wonder if this connection he's made with Ygritte will affect his ability to carry out future tasks on this mission or future missions.
Yes.
He's going to
especially
see them
if all 5 of them are dead.
Yes. And is he going to come clean at some point? And if there's no body, he has. If they inquire about the body, I guess he could say I dumped her over the cliff like the other ones.
Yeah. I would have taken like a couple of threads of her hair and wrapped it around the sword, perhaps. Like, got her.
Got her. Oh man.
But I gotta say, I think Ygritte is gonna rat him out to Mance. I mean, I think that's what she would do. She's a wildling. She is not doughy-eyed in love with her captor.
Right.
She's not Brandon Stark's daughter.
Yes. Yes, we don't know her well yet, but we might never know her well at all if we never see her again. But she seems like she was not. She was playing Jon for what she needed to get from Jon, not truly trying to strike up some sort of friendship with him here.
Yeah.
Well, anything else? All right, then. As always, you can reach us at ghosts.harrenhall@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter @GhostHarrenhall. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Discord.
And there's 3 ways you can help us. First and foremost, go out and leave us a review. Give us a rating and a review. There's no better advertising. That spreads the word. Secondly, you could buy some of the merch that Miguel said we've got more of at ghostsofharrenhall.threadless.com. Or you can buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at www.buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhall. Big thank you to those who've already become sustainers. You're really helping.
Thank you so very much for that.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.